Unlike formulas in Excel that are set to automatically update when the value feeding into them changes, this is not the case for pivot tables. A pivot table will not update itself automatically when the raw data behind changes. So if we take our employees multiple pivot file, and we can see here we have 6 people in personnel and 26 in sales. If we then go into the employees data and come across to the departments and change one of the ones in sales and say that they are now in admin, come back to the pivots, and the number of people in sales is still 26. It has not changed. If you want to update your pivot tables, you have to tell them to refresh. Now there are 2 ways of doing that, either manually against each pivot table by simply going right click and refresh. And you can see then admin jumps up to 1 and sales drops down to 25. Alternatively, we can come across to this particular pivot table because this would need updating as well. And you can see that it's pulled through the new admin person who's on 57, 250 and are divorced. Admin, divorced, 57, 250. So the proof's there. So by refreshing the one pivot table here, we've refreshed the other 3. Obviously, we cannot see that effect here because no changes were made to the marital status or the gender. The alternative is to tell the pivot table to refresh every time the file opens, which we do through the pivot table options. And we can access those either on the right click, pivot table options, data, and here's the option for refresh data when opening the file. So if we were to place a tick in there, we're then told that obviously this can only take effect when the file reopens, but that's great, we know that. So every time the file now opens, pivot tables will refresh themselves, but they won't refresh themselves while it is open without you manually telling each pivot table to refresh, which is either right click refresh or from the pivot table's context sensitive ribbon, analyze and then refresh, and you'll see refresh has a little drop down of refresh, which will refresh the current pivot table, or refresh all, that refreshes all the pivot tables in this particular book. And the keyboard shortcuts are displayed there for you as well. Control Alt and F5 for refresh all. Alt and F5 for refresh the current table. So that's just something to bear in mind that to date, all the formulas that you've worked with have automatically updated themselves when their source behind the formula is changed, but this does not apply to pivot tables. Your pivot tables need to be either refreshed manually, or we can set the option to refresh on open.